Hey everybody, Dr. Bob Rowe here. Okay, this presentation is really about how to use the most important part of your brain, the little bit that really counts. Now, I'm going to go through some examples and I'm going to make some comments. So we're going to look at a few things in the beginning, then I'm going to go through my little presentation on how your brain really works and what you really need to know to get ahead in this life. You've already done it. You just aren't realizing that you are using it, but most of the time you're not. Most of the time you're using the opposite of that. But we're going to explain all of that through a few video presentations and a few comments that I make, and then I'm going to go through a little presentation. Then we're going to go back through the videos again, and at the end you will then see when you're using the positive aspect of your brain to get what you want and when you're not. So let's have a look. So here's one of the most prolific educators as far as marketing in the internet field these days. Came up from almost nothing. You can look at his story, but what I want you to look at is his energy and where he puts his emphasis on everything that he does, and see if you can get that internal feeling that he must have when he talks about what he does. Now, we're going to talk about that in the presentation a bit more, but just get into that and try and identify with what that is. So let's have a look.
Think about. I hope you think about, what are you good at? Or what are you really, what's the truest essence of who you are? Because those are the only two things that create the upside that people chase. Because I know people with tons of money that are sad as shit. I'm telling you two things: either talent, magic, which I do not believe that you can manufacture, and or what the fuck really drives you for real. And maybe it won't make so much money right now, but when you deploy the tactics of Snapchat and Facebook ads and AR and Pokemon Go and whatever you deploy the tactics against, if you're deploying it against fake shit that's being built just to make a dollar, you're gonna lose over time. You're not going to be able to sustain.
Okay, so here's the important point. Listen to him on this one. This is where he really gets into what drives him. Now, see if you can identify with this when you are looking at what you do and when you've accomplished something significant in your life. See if any of this really applies to you, because I think this is really important. And we're going to address this in the talk, but just listen very carefully.
You know why I hustle? Because I fucking love it. You know why I hustle? Because it's my oxygen. You know why I hustle? Because I don't even know what the fuck else to do. This is what I do. And if you really think about what would you do every minute, I'm retired now. When people say they're gonna retire and play golf and surf, great. I'm doing that now. If you asked me to golf, I'd rip my fucking arm off. I'd be so pissed. I don't want to lay on a beach. My head's turning. I want to do shit. I want to make shit. I want to talk to you. I want to live. This is how I live. The people that hustle the most are the happiest.
So listen to what he's saying here, and that internal feeling, it's driving him so much. And we're going to talk about what that is and how to develop it in yourself. And it's not a big thing. It's you've already done it, but we're just going to identify where that is and where you bring it up from so that you can utilize it when you want. But listen very carefully. I mean, he's pouring his whole soul into this. This is everything to him. So listen again.
Not the saddest. Thank you. And the thing you'll make the most money on is the thing you like the most, because the thing you like the most will allow you to work the hardest, and that will be the variable of success. And if you love it so much, you'll also research it more, because it's what you'd naturally do anyway in your free time, and then you'll work harder, and then you'll make money.
So again, take a look at what he's saying. We're going to go into the depth behind what drives that. That's really the essence of what this is all about.
Figuring out who you are, especially at this young of an age, challenge. You've been told who you are most of your life.
Okay, so the important part here is that, do we really make up our own mind of who we are and what we do? I don't think so. And I think what he's pointing out here is he's found what he is, what he wants to do, and how he wants to do it. And that's what he is doing. And we're going to talk about that. But In most cases, listen to what he's saying about how we're programmed, and we'll talk about that too.
So going in that cocoon by yourself and figuring it out and blocking out everything, that's fucking hard. So I'll answer your question, but I promise you, that's not so simple. And honestly, that's what's happening in this space too much. Everybody's going to step 2, and I haven't even started on step 1. I got time to watch the New York Jets. That's my escapism. Other than that, family and this shit. You're asking the wrong person how to tune out other shit, because I don't care. I haven't read anybody's fucking book.
Okay, so on this one, you really have to understand that there's something that drives everything in his life, and that's what we're going to talk about. But let's look at something else. Okay, so this fellow went and saw this really successful billionaire that was about age 100, and he was getting all the secrets to how he became this all-star billionaire throughout his life and what led up to that. But what I want to emphasize here is talking about simple things, and that's what we're going to talk about in the presentation. But how simple is it? Listen to the experts. We'll go through a couple of them, but listen to what he says here.
About this one concept, and that is you want to find those few things, and then you want to stick to them, and then you want to master them. And you see, I think at this point of the conference, you've been given so many ideas, and we're always looking at the bleeding edge, what's new, what's novel, what's shiny. And this, I think, is a really important reminder that when it comes down to it, when you go back to your businesses or your relationships or your lives, in the end, only a few things matter.
And again, here's what he's talking about is that in the world today, there's so many things. We're so distracted by so many things. But if you look at the experts like Gary Vaynerchuk we just look at his energy. He only does one thing, and that's that he looks at the leading edge abilities and ways to market what he's doing in social media today. That's all he does. So he's just stuck to a few very minimal things. And listen to, this is an expert who has interviewed one of the most successful, rich, older people. And after all of his life and all of the things he's done, he has boiled it down to just a few things. And we're going to talk about the really important few things.
I want to unpack this for you. I remember watching a Stephen Hawking's documentary, The Grand Design. He's trying to explain the cosmos and the universe. And he said, you can understand the cosmos, the universe, and complicated systems like the brain because they all boil down and are governed by a few simple principles.
So again, here's what I'm talking about, is that the smartest minds on the planet know that it all comes down to just a few simple things that we'll look at and how we can utilize those things to take advantage of this amazing brain that we have. But the experts keep saying this, but they don't even know themselves. What are those few simple things? They seem to go to all of these other things. So let's listen a bit more.
Few simple principles govern the entire universe and the cosmos, as well as the brain. And when you understand those simple principles, you now know how to make sense of and govern and master these complicated systems.
And then the final technology for you to create exponential productivity is what I call learned minimalism. So,
Okay, so again, here's another expert, Robin Sharma. Amazing guy. Teaches many people with to very successful heights. But again, I don't think he really gets that part of his brain that actually drives him and what is behind that, which we will talk about in a minute. But again, here's another one that's talking about just a very few important things.
And then the final technology for you to create exponential productivity is what I call learned minimalism. So, minimalism is often considered as a design philosophy, right? It's like very stark, very sparse, sometimes industrial, lots of white, not a lot of things. It's, like you go into a boutique hotel and, it's designed by Philippe Starck, the great French designer, and it's very minimalist. What I'm encouraging you to do with great love and respect is to be ultra productive, adopt the mindset of learned minimalism.
So listen to this. This is really important because, again, when we do the presentation, you will pick up on what really matters in your brain and how to utilize it. But, you know, here's a guy who continually adds content and more content, except in this particular vignette, he's talking about minimalism, just using a few simple things. And there seems to be a conflict in what's being presented here, and we'll go through why that is in just a second.
Now, I've worked with a lot of the most creative and productive people on the planet. I've worked with billionaires and CEOs. I've worked with true titans. Here's one thing I've observed in them. They understand that the secret to genius is not complexity, it's simplicity.
Okay, so let's talk about what's really going on in the success world these days, where everybody's being motivated to get better, to do better, all of those things. But there's so much that they pour content on. How many books are out there telling you about how successful people act, what they do, why they do, all of those things that are, as far as I'm concerned, abstract. But let's listen to one of the most popular success people today. And I always call this reporting, but let's just listen for a second. And this is the 6 Habits of High Performers. He had a whole book on this. And again, you know, I'm going to comment in a minute, but just listen to him for a second.
Here's what doesn't make high performance, though, because I think it's important before we tell you what is. We got to bust a few myths. Here's what high performance is not strongly correlated with.
Okay, so listen to this. This is really important. Everybody can be successful if they use the right brain strategies, if they can get their brain to operate on that high level that we saw that Gary Vaynerchuk was working on and what he lives his life for. Take a look at that and think about it in the background of your mind. But look at what they found is that there's no one particular category, age category, particular race category. There's no genius category. It's open to everybody, and that's the key point I wanted to make here.
Only 6. Here's what doesn't make high performance, though, because I think it's important before we tell you what is. We got to bust a few myths. Here's what high performance is not strongly correlated with. Doesn't matter how old you are. You can't blame your gender. Doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter how smart you are. Doesn't matter what your personality is. Doesn't matter how many strengths you have or what your strengths profile is at all. Doesn't matter how creative you are or empathetic. Doesn't matter how many years of experience, and doesn't matter how much you get paid. So if you've ever, about any of those things in your life, you can't blame them anymore. Performers are more successful than their...
Okay, here's what I want to comment about this. Again, you know, how many books has he written on being better, performing better, getting to that high performance level, blah, 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 blah. We could go through all of those. They highlight what they see as a result of what drives that person. They're not telling you what drives them. They're not telling you how to get to that point. And that's what we'll discuss, how you get to that point of being able to drive yourself to do all these things. It's like me saying to you, yeah, and they all use toothpaste. All of these high performance people. They probably use deodorant. They probably take showers. They probably wear shoes and socks. Yes, they do. There are some traits that are very similar, but that's not what drives them. So let's listen a little bit more.
The data doesn't prove it out. Now, here's what we found out from our big study. Some simple things. Number 1, high performers are more successful than their peers in almost every category of measurement you could take, whether how much they earn, what they do, how far they succeed in their own industry, etc. They're also more confident than their peers. But notice on that first one, I forgot to say, they're also less stressed. This idea that more success is going to only stress you out, because look, more success only stresses you out when you don't have the habits to handle it.
Okay, I got to talk about this one. Here we are. Just listen for a second. I call this hypnosis because he obviously wants you to buy his book, and it's a good read. Does it ever tell you what is that essence that drove Gary Vaynerchuk? What is that essence that drives this guy? What is that essence that drove that billionaire, that older gentleman that said, you just need a few simple things? What is that? Most of success today is what I call hypnosis. In other words, buy my book, I will tell you the secret. The secret does not exist within a book. It exists within you. It's about how you bring that forward. Let's just listen to a little bit more of this.
Raise your hand and follow. So if you fear success, don't fear success. Get better habits. That's all. Number 2, they're more confident than other people. Number 3, they produce prolific quality output. High performers are prolific in their field, no matter what that means. If they're a salesperson, it's more sales calls, right? If they're an artist, it's more paintings. If it's a musician, it's Beethoven, right? It's just cranking out the product that matters in your area of expertise. They work passionately, whether you pay them high or not, because...
Okay, here he said it. Intrinsic motivations. He didn't say what they were. He didn't say how to get to them. He just said that you needed it. So he's implying you got to buy his book. And once you learn these 6 habits, then automatically you are just going to be a high performer and do well. Well, no, those are outside things, like wearing the right hat or wearing the right shoes or wearing the right deodorant. Not going to make you there, not going to get you there, not going to do it for you. That's not what this is about. I'm going to go on for a bit more, but I'm hoping you're getting the point here that there's a difference between that internal drive and finding what that is, and that's what we're going to talk about, and the part that is common to everybody. Once they find that internal drive, yeah, they're going to work more passionately. Yeah, they're going to be more prolific. Yeah, they're going to break down more barriers. They'll be more confident. Not that they're even thinking about that. They're thinking about that final output, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
They're driven by intrinsic motivations, the care, the passion, the art, the fulfillment of what they do. They're admired and they're adaptive. They change faster, they make decisions faster. They're happier than most people. They're healthier than most people. They get better grades, and they also feel appreciated about their work. There's no loneliness at the top. They feel like people appreciate them, understand how hard they work, and they feel rewarded for it. In other words, a lot of these people you might not initially like. These 6 habits change everything. But this last piece is so highly correlated with high performance, you got to get it. Demonstrating courage.
Okay, so the whole courage thing, again, you know, when you have that internal drive, you're not worrying about any of those things. You don't need to understand those 6 habits. You don't need to understand the 11 universal laws of success. You don't need to learn all the chapters there are in Think and Grow Rich. I mean, I could go on and on and on. But I hope you're getting the point here that this is more reporting. This is telling the result of you getting that internal thing that drives you. And we're going to talk about how to get that, because that's the thing that nobody really seems to talk about. And it's just the simple things on how our brain works that we want to understand. So don't get too caught up in all of this stuff. Just understand it's just more reporting about what happens when you get onto that internal drive. What happens to you? You just automatically express those things. Not that you're looking to do that, but that's just a byproduct of you getting into that and understanding what that thing is that's driving you and just following that drive. That's really what it's all about.
It means it is time for you to tell your family what you really think, need, believe, dream of. Same with your team, same with your spouse. All the holding back of what you really want in life, in silence, there is suffering.
Okay, again, you know, this is more hypnosis. This is more reporting. I mean, he's a great guy. I really like what he does, like what he says. But the point is that don't worry about telling anybody else. You find your passion, and we'll talk about how that happens, and then the rest will follow. It just happens that way. You cannot say that, okay, I'm going to learn to be more passionate, and then I'll be better. No, that doesn't work. That's not the way it works. And we're going to start talking about how our brains are put together and how it works. I hope you got the idea on this one. Again, you know, I'm not criticizing this guy. He's great. He's prolific. He gets a lot of stuff out there. He gets a lot of attention. And that's one of the drives that he has. And that's what keeps him running. So let's really look into what that is. And let's look at how this whole thing works. Okay, so let's go through a few very, very simple things. Let's look at things that we understand, and then we'll move into the things that really matter. So right now, if you listen to all the success people, no one will disagree that you're unlimited. You have amazing potential. If we talk about quantum physics, if we boil everything down to the smallest, tiniest little particles, it's all energy that comes and goes. So it is all about energy. The other thing that is something that we understand is that there is one common source to everything. In other words, even the Big Bang Theory says that started with nothing, all of a sudden, boom, it's all there. But it all comes from the one source. And that's really what you have to understand, that we're all made up of stardust. Listen to the scientists, the same source where everything came from. That if you believe in God, I believe there's an energy source that holds everything together. Call it what you want it. That's probably why there's so many names to call it whatever it is to try and understand it in our limited way of understanding it, but probably bigger than we could ever really understand. But just think about that there is this energy that holds everything together. The other thing is that when we look at the different things that have been happening, like life after life is another example of that. Hypnosis for past lives. We know that we don't die. We change this thing we call a body, but in reality, we don't die. We don't pass on. We are turned into dust. We're not our body, so to speak. We're this energy behind it, and we'll talk about that in a second. So let's start from here. So here we are on planet Earth, and there's certain rules that we learn by on planet Earth. It's a physical environment. You know, that we breathe air. There's oxygen around the planet. We need water, that kind of thing. And when we come here, we're equipped with what? We're equipped with a body, right? And in that body, it has all of these different components that all work together in order for us to survive and thrive. If certain conditions happen, we thrive. So what we understand is that the controlling mechanism of who we are and what we are is the brain and the nervous system. That's where we have our thoughts, where our thoughts are manipulated and translated and run our bodies. And let's have a little more in-depth look at what this is. Now, I don't want to go too deep into this one because, again, this is just reporting on what we have and how we work. But if you can get just a little bit of understanding of how we work, and how awesome we are and what our potential is, then when we get to the point of how do we get that drive behind us, like Gary Vaynerchuk expressed, how do we get that drive behind us that gets us to utilize this huge, amazing potential? Because that's the key, is developing that drive. But what is the attributes that we have in our brain? Well, we have 100 billion neurons. That's a fantastic amount. And each neuron can connect with 10,000 or more other neurons, make 10,000 or more other connections. But even more than that, if you combine the different possibilities of combinations of connections, it's totally unlimited. It's way more than we could ever even consider. Our logical brains cannot go there. We need computers to figure all of that stuff out for us. And we know all this stuff because neuroscience is one of the most studied sciences today. We're putting more into that than we're putting into computers or any of the other sciences. And why? Because we want to study. We want to know what is behind this thing called the brain. How does it work? All of those different things. So there's a few important facts we have to know. And so again, from what those experts said, it all boils down to a few simple things. So if we look at the brain is dedicated to a couple of really important things. I mean, it does all kinds of things. It runs your body, blah, 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 blah. But these are the most important things that we need to know for this little understanding that we're doing here right now. Most of your brain is dedicating to be happy and creative. And creative is really important because we know that the thing that really creates a difference with us as human beings is that we have this one part of our brain, the frontal lobe, that is really dedicated to being creative. And so we have three different aspects to us. We have hardware, we have the software, the programming, but then there's this thing called the operator. And that's really important to understand. So let's go through a few of these things. So let's talk about the hardware. So the hardware is all of those neurons that fire back and forth, that talk to each other, that run all little programs. They're tiny little computers connected to a multi-computer. And it's an amazing connection where they all connect together, all parts of the brain talking to each other, always connecting and always working for the better good of you. And the engine of creativity is, again, this thing called the frontal lobe. It's bigger than any other animal on the planet. Like some whales have bigger brains than us. Elephants, I think, have bigger brains than us. But we have the biggest frontal lobe, which is the engine of creativity. It's the part of the brain that allows us to make choices, conscious choices, decide, do we want to live here? Do we want to migrate somewhere on the other side of the planet? And we can pick up and we can move ourselves there and thrive in that area. It's the creative part of our brain that allows us to do that. So we do have that. What do I have to remind you, though, that you are not your brain. In other words, you have a brain and you can utilize it. Just like Gary Vaynerchuk has a brain and he has a drive to do this certain thing. So you are not your brain, and you're not your name either. Bob Proctor, one of the success gurus, talks about that. Until you can get outside yourself and say that, no, I'm not my brain, and I'm not my name, and I'm not what I do, and I'm not where I live, and I'm not my particular background, or I'm not my education. I am the operator behind the brain, I am the person, the entity that accomplished all those things using this amazing thing called the brain. So you have to get to that understanding. So in actual fact, you're really the operator. You are different from your brain. You're different from what you do. You are the operator. You get a chance to stand back, look at life around you, and decide exactly how you want to run the equipment. That's really where your place is. And human beings, out of all the animals, are the ones that can make this choice. We can decide how we want to operate our life, how we want to make it better. That's really the difference. And that's the part behind whether you're going to be successful, whether you're going to make it, or whether you're going to suffer. That is really what happens. So let's look at another aspect. So we talk about the mind. And really mind in this aspect, and what we're talking about, is the software. And that's the programming. That allows you to know how to drive your car, to put your socks on in the morning. If you swim, learn how to swim. You know how to swim. That's the programming in your mind. And that's important. That programming runs your body, runs all the internal organs. But that is not who you are. That's not the operator. That is the programming behind it. And it's good that it's automatic programming because it allows you to actually utilize it. So let's do a little bit of an experiment so we can differentiate a few of these things. So what I want you to do is just close your eyes and imagine two things. First, imagine that you've been given the choice that you get a chance to decide between happiness and money. So let's go first to happiness. Just close your eyes and think of, okay, see yourself as happy. What does that do for you? Just stay in there for a second. You know, that thing that you individually describe as happy. Feel that, see that. What is that to you? Okay, got that? Okay, now I'm going to switch. I've just given you a bank account with $100 million in it. Now I want you to think about, holy cow, what are those things that you can do with that money? Who can you help? What trips can you take? What things can you buy? How many people that are destitute and the people you really want to help with all kinds of different problems? Who are those people, and what are you going to do with that money that is going to help them? Think about that for just a second. Okay, let's talk about that. Okay, in both instances, you were the operator. You got to choose. You got to look at the different aspects. What we found, though, is that science tells us when we have a choice between the two of them, the concrete thing of money and what we can do with it lights up our brain way more than just the idea of happiness. And that's because that's the way our brain works. And we have to have something tangible to go after in order to make our brain work for us. And that's what drives behind our brain. And that's what Gary Vaynerchuk was displaying. That was that drive, that thing, that tangible thing that he could see from doing what he's doing in the social media realm, and how he was such an expert and helped so many people doing that. So now we understand that. We need to understand, okay, what's getting in our way? Okay, well, let's talk about other programming. We've had a lot of societal programming that goes on. I'm just pointing out religion here because that's probably one of the biggest ones. But we all believe our parents and what they've taught us and all those things. So all of that programming that we identify ourselves, which really, again, remember, you're the operator. You can stand back and ask yourself, is that really true? Do I really believe that? You can read Byron Katie's book. It really helps you to get set on, is that true or is that not true? Or is that just a belief that runs me and I let it run me? And so there's only two choices in life. For you to make the choice of you being the operator and deciding on the programs, or you running with the program and letting the program run you, a program that somebody else has given you, and you just haven't stopped to question it. And that's the difference. That's the difference between being the operator and letting somebody else making your decisions for you. And so you can need to think about that for just a second, but you don't need to get too deep into that for what we're going to talk about. So our unique factor as human beings, like I said before, is that we have this ability to be the operator, to make the choice. And that's where we are right now. So you must get that. That's really important for us to move on to the next thing. So accept that you are the operator. You do have the choice. You make the choice. So I have a question for you. So here we are. We're on this planet with amazing atmosphere, amazing environment for us to thrive. We have an unlimited brain with unlimited possibilities. So if we're here with an unlimited brain, with unlimited possibilities, with a chance to do incredible things like other human beings have done, do you think that the operating system should be that complex? Remember the first few videos after Gary Vaynerchuk when we talked about those experts that found it was just a few simple things that made such a difference? So, is it just a few simple things? And it is, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so why haven't we gotten to this before? Why haven't we been able to understand this before? Here's the thing. We've been taught by people who've been schooled by the people before them, who've accepted their beliefs. We talked about, are they actually choosing the beliefs, or have they accepted what has been programmed for them and given to them? And if you look at all the systems, they're all, and we can go in more depth here, but we really won't because that's not the point of this. Just to be aware that schools have programmed you a certain way that doesn't reach that particular driving force that gets you what you want. As a matter of fact, the most successful entrepreneurs are the ones that had the most difficulty in school. Like I mentioned, Einstein, he didn't do too well in school, but when he learned to get into that thrive and drive that was behind him being so successful, look how successful he became. The political system, I call it the Santa Claus system. That's just a system that says that we can leave everything up to our political leaders because they'll do it all for me. No, not going to happen. Never has, never will. That system doesn't work. Medical care system, well, you can look into the Rockefellers and how they destroyed that system. I'm not going into that right now, but more people use alternative methods than the basic medical care system. So what does that say? That no, that doesn't have all the answers either. So what you have to ask yourself is, are you running the show, or are you letting somebody else run the show for you? So what we need to do is we need to know the rules. And here are just a few simple rules that you want to understand. So super successful people use these rules, and they're simple. They might not always understand what I'm going to explain to you in a second, but they use these rules. So let's talk about these rules. Let's get right into them because they're actually very simple. There are just two simple rules that run you, or you're able to use to run you. Just the way it goes. So the one area is the law of conservation of energy. That means that it takes a lot of energy to run your brain. And then unless your brain really feels that this is an important thing, it won't work for it. It'll actually work against you. The second thing is the law of focus on reward. If there isn't something really important for you to get, and there isn't a reward for your brain to go towards, then there's no drive to go there. And that's basically it. So how does this work? So everything starts with a thought, right? We have thoughts about all kinds of different things. Some we action on the thoughts, some we don't. So what do we want to know about thoughts? Well, everything that we see around us that was created by a human started out with a thought. In other words, it had to become physical and tangible only after being developed. But first of all, the thought of how that could be had to start and then went through process. So what was the process that allowed that to happen? Well, it's how much value that person put on that. How much need was there for that particular thing? In other words, that person really thought that that was important, whatever they developed and however they developed it, or else it would have just been a thought that just passed by and there wouldn't have been anything behind it. And really what that stirs up, that value system, how much you value it, is an emotion. Now, Joe Dispenza talks about that as the emotions run the body, and then the body runs the brain through emotions. And that's really true. If you don't have that emotional grab behind you that pushes you, then you definitely will not go on to higher heights. You won't create what you want to create. You will stop right there. So it's the emotion behind you that creates that desire to get it done, that creates that big reward at the end, that you will actually get it done. And that's called the law of focus on reward. So when you create that huge, big final outcome, in other words, what that will give you, and you live in that aspect of, wow, this is so great how this is going to be. I'm going to have this, and I'm going to have this. My friends are going to talk to me about this, and it's going to be, as Gary Vaynerchuk talked about, it's my oxygen. I need this to live. When you're in that state, you will always find a way to get there. Now, Simon Sinek, he talks about the why. You got to find your why. And that, again, is another way of describing it. But when you have that drive that you want, the outcome of what you're going to produce, doing what you're going to do, is so strong that you just have to find a way to do it. All those other things fall in place. Like all those things when we talked about all the success people and all the things they were reporting on, how they were more driven, how they accomplished more, how they had more confidence. Yeah, that ended up what they had, but that's not what created the end outcome. It was what they valued. It was the reason that when they looked at what they were going to do and how they were going to create it, that gave them the drive. They wanted that so badly that there was nothing that was going to get in the way. And all the other things that the success people were reporting on are just reports of what happened to them as a result of them getting that idea of what they wanted and how they wanted it and why it was so important to them for them to do it. So now that you're getting a good idea of what that is, here's what I'm going to give you to do. So let's do some homework. Now, this is just going to reverberate in your brain, so you don't have to take much time to do this, but what I want you to do is to break down what you really value in life. What is it that really drives you, that brings up that internal motivation, that why, that thing that you really want to do. Now, it doesn't have to be anything big. It can be anything from cooking great meals to wanting to put somebody on Mars. It doesn't matter what it is, but you'll know when you're there because you'll get that really deep internal feeling that that's it. That's what I want to do. So what I want you to do is make a list of a number of things. You might not come to it right away, but make a list of different things that you really want in life. Things that you think will really make your life that much better, or make somebody else's life that much better. Things that really motivate you to get there. And that really is your personal value system. You have to look at what you value in life, because that's really what's going to drive you, and where you get your rewards. What makes you feel really good by doing that particular thing. So when you go through your goals and you look at those things, just really think about, what is it that's behind all that? What do I value the most that makes me feel really good about doing a particular thing? And that will give you more motivation to get things done than anything else. One of the things I want to look at, though, is there is a great book called Outwitting the Devil. Now, this is the other half of, we saw the law of conservation of energy. This talks all about the law of conservation of energy. All the reasons why you shouldn't do what you want to do. In other words, it's a great book. It's using the devil as kind of the one that created all the problems, but it's not really. It's just your belief patterns that really create all that. And the biggest problem in there was fear. People wouldn't do anything because they had this big fear. And that the big thing about that book was you had to learn to conquer your fear. You had to conquer it every day. And what is more important than that? I mean, it's important to conquer your fears, but what's more important than that is that you have to ask yourself one question. And what do you value more than this fear? This is the how of it, how you overcome the fear. You have all the tools. You have to understand what you value way more than the fear that is going to allow you to get past the fear. If the reward at the end isn't big enough, you're never going to get past that fear. So what is it that you could put there as a value that would get you past any fear in front of you? And that's exactly what you have to understand. That, we've all done it in our lives. We've looked at that outcome, even when we were kids. Oh, we got to do all these chores around the house. But in the end, what are we going to get? We're going to get a reward at the end. Maybe we're going to go on vacation somewhere. Maybe we're going to get paid some money that we can go and buy our favorite toy or whatever. But there was a reward. And we would do anything to get to that point, to get that reward. So again, just make a list of things that you want and look at the things that come highest on the list. That the things that rise up, the things that will make you more, give you that internal desire more. And those are the most important things in your life. And it will tell you a lot about what you desire and what you want out of life. And live in the space of that feeling and what that will give to you. Because it's really important for you to understand those things. If you don't understand those things, you're never going to get to where you want to go. So, and the big thing is, again, it's the emotion. Where does that come from in your body? Where in your body are you feeling that? You know that when you've done something successful, that emotion comes up. So when you're looking at those things that you want, feel where that emotion comes from. Feel the things that reward you the most, because that's what you're really looking for. So, and again, if you can't find what that emotion is, then you won't get past that hurdle. You'll be sliding back into the law of conservation of energy, because the language of the brain and the body is emotion, and living in it already happening. And when you can get to that point and living and feeling how great that's going to be, that's when it's really going to happen to you, because that brings up that energy and that drive. And again, it's not those habits of being, of creating more, doing more, blah, 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 blah. That's a result of you finding that internal drive, that internal emotion that will drive you to get things done, you will overcome any fear or any barrier that you encounter, and that will allow you to get to where you want to go. So that's really what you want to do, is take a look at, go through those things in your life that you really, really value, that really turns on that emotion, because then you're going to know that you're there. I mean, one of the things that got me was when I was learning to do video editing, some of the best teaching aids I used were from this 9-year-old kid who got a real high out of copying his video game playing skills and then describing what he's doing on video. He was amazing at video editing, like 9 years old. What drove him was basically how good he felt about showing his friends how he could break down his video games, and he could actually record them and then display them back. That gave him such a strong internal drive that he would do anything to get that done. And the same with, video games. Why do people play video games? Because that end drive of what they could do and how they'd accomplish it, that reward of actually accomplishing it in the end, is that internal drive. That's what you have to find. That's really what motivates us as human beings. And without that, you will not succeed. That's how we succeed. So, in a review, we have an unlimited brain. You are the operator. You get to make the choice. You get to take the chance that makes the change. And each time you do that, you get better. You get better and better at making those choices, at getting closer to getting what you want. And that's really what happens, is that it just keeps getting better. And it's the emotions that drive you. You got to find the emotion behind it. You got to create that big picture at the end, the reward that you will get. Because that reward has to overcome that law of conservation of energy. When you can overcome that law of conservation of energy by that huge emotional reward that you will get, your brain will drag you kicking and screaming to your goal. That's just the way it is. So in the end, just realize that you are incredible. You have amazing abilities you haven't even scraped the surface of. I always say that we have an unlimited brain. The only thing that's limited in our lifetime is the time that we have to utilize it. So really, you don't have time to worry about all these extraneous things. Just practice the emotion of getting to that point where it makes you feel really good, that overcomes all your fears and all your obstacles. Start small. Just do 1 or 2 things. Go on to the next thing, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. But remember, you are incredible. You have all the tools. You just have to put these simple things in place, and then that will allow you to get whatever you want. So let's go back and let's have a look at some of the other videos that we've looked at. Let's go back to Gary.
Two things that create the upside that people chase. Because I know people with tons of money that are sad as shit. I'm telling you, 2 things. Either talent, magic, which I do not believe that you can manufacture, and or what the fuck really drives you for real.
And that's the point, right? What drives you? Ask yourself that question. What is it? What do you value? That's really important.
And maybe you won't make so much money right now, but when you deploy the tactics of...
So what about that 9-year-old kid who taught me so much on video editing? What drove him? It wasn't money. He wasn't looking for money. It was a different reward. It was that internal drive that got him to go.
Snapchat and Facebook ads and AR and Pokemon Go and whatever you deploy the tactics against.
So what he's saying here is, yeah, once you got that internal drive, you can use all of the attributes around you, all of the other things that are out there to enhance and to enrich what you've done, and you can find a way to make money on it. But until you have that internal drive and that feeling of what that's going to give you, you will not get there.
Deploying it against fake shit that's being built just to make $1, you're gonna lose over time. You're not gonna be able to sustain. You know why I hustle? Because I fucking love it. You know why I hustle? Because it's my oxygen.
You know why I hustle? Because I don't even know what the fuck else to do. This is what I do. And it's like, if you really think about what would you do every minute, like, I'm retired now. Like, when people say they're gonna retire and play golf and surf, great. I'm doing that now. If you asked me to golf, I'd rip my fucking arm off. I'd be so pissed.
So, again, the final point. What is he saying here? He's saying that he's found his internal drive. That's what motivates him. That's what makes his life the way it is. He's loving his life. Don't give him anything else to do. You know, if you force yourself into trying to do something that you're not really committed to doing, that doesn't drive you, it's going to be painful. You're not going to get there, and your brain is going to fight you. So first of all, find out what that is. What is the thing that drives you? What is that internal feeling that gives you that incredible energy that will have you overcome any fear, that will allow you to break through any barrier? That is really what this is all about. Thanks a lot for paying attention. I hope you enjoyed it.